Well, it was a fairly remarkable thing because Melbourne was already probably one of the greatest newspaper markets in the world then, with the Sun and the Age and the Herald probably selling 1 million papers a day. So there was no one screaming out for another newspaper. But Rupert Murdoch, having just taken over HWT, maybe with concerns about the size of the Age and its revenues and a bit of envy and jealousy, and perhaps seeing that the Sydney market with the Sunday Telegraph and the Fairfax Sun Herald, we were raking multi-million-dollar revenues compared to the then Melbourne market, which had the Sunday Observer and the Sunday Press, which was a combined HWT, SIME arrangement, if you like, of convenience to try and stop Rupert coming in originally. But so when he took over, he was clearly going to make a splash. So in early '89, he signalled that he had had enough of this cosy arrangement with the dreaded enemy, Fairfax or SIME, and said we're going to have a Sunday paper. And it became papers. So Fairfax or the SIME didn't want it. They were quite happy with the Sunday Press arrangement and thought it was going to be a very costly exercise for everybody with a lot of blood on the floor and no real gain. And they were very cost conscious, particularly at SIME, because the way SIME was protecting its independence within the Fairfax network was to be as profitable as possible. And the more money we make, the less they'll interfere, type of ethos. So they were very reluctant participants. In fact, they sincerely hoped it would never happen, even after the announcement. So, but anyway, it finally got announced in May, formally. The other two Sundays closed and in due course, and we launched in August. So we had 3 months' notice to get going. A really sort of solid Sunday broadsheet was going to be a challenge, with talent coming in from the Sunday Times and goodness knows where else to help make it work. And very experienced editors all round. I'd never edited anything other than a section of my life. And so we had the least corporate support, the least corporate cooperation, the smallest and dingiest office space, the smallest staff, the less sort of corporate cooperation, if you like, against a pretty well-oiled, committed, well-resourced machine. So the conventional wisdom around the traps was that the Sunday Age would be the loser ultimately, and this so-called pincer movement that, as they described it, with a tabloid and a broadsheet from HWT or News Limited coming in against the poor old Sunday Age, that they would ultimately win and either squeeze the Sunday Age out entirely and put a dent, they hoped, in Saturday's Age. Then we got a really good staff together. I think that was probably the key, because you had to get people who were prepared to take the risk of either leaving HWT or News to come across to the dreaded enemy, so that was like a treasonous act in itself, to join a Sunday paper with no certain future, really, in the Sunday Wars, because the Times and Sunday had failed and that had gone. People remember Newsday and others had gone, so there's no guarantee it was going to work. And if it failed, if you were at the Sunday Herald, and if it failed, you could probably pick up a job in News Limited somewhere because it was big enough to absorb you. If you came to the Sunday Age and it folded or failed, not many wanted to work on the Age and not many wanted to work for Fairfax. So the risk was quite high. But anyway, we managed to persuade people who just enjoyed warmed to the challenge and weren't going to die wondering. So you get people like, Jeff Slattery and Mickey Gordon and Caroline Wilson and, Guthrie and Jan Applegren and, Mike Sheehan. We've got some really good people, and that was the core, because they were all in this together. It was us against them type attitude, both internally at the Age to some degree and certainly against the two papers. And that mentality meant we would do whatever it took to get the story, get the paper out on time, which was a challenge, and try and survive. Well, the Sunday Herald, you couldn't be but a little bit envious, because both papers, the Sun and the Herald, were bigger than ours in terms of overall pagination. The Sunday Herald had a really good quality, glossy, 72-page magazine, sort of London quality, which overshadowed the Good Weekend, which was then running in the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age on Saturday. They had, a really good crew, lots of experience, people who'd edited papers in Hong Kong and the Australian and other things. So a lot more experience, a lot more resources, and a lot more money. And the Sunday Sun was kind of a seventh-day edition, if you like, perhaps a bit lighter than the Daily in some senses. Probably trying to pick up some of the old Sunday Press market. But and it was its own solid, seventh-day edition. So they were strong in their own right. There was no great surprises because we knew what was coming. And we were kind of the player up the middle in this so-called pincer movement, the middle ground as they called it, and everyone said, well, if you caught neither one nor the other, you're going to lose out, was the common ethos, but we proved them wrong. That morning, we were dreading that the competition would have some super world exclusive lined up and we were going to be severely embarrassed. And as it turned out, they didn't, but we had nothing. Any stories we had been exhausted or knocked off. So, but we did have Mickey Gordon manage to jag an interview with Keating, which was his first interview post the Kirribilli Agreement, the famous Kirribilli Agreement, which was a very, very revealing interview in itself. So we knew we had something for page one with a bigger piece inside. But then we lucked on to the prospect that the two of them might actually agree to be in a photograph together, which was a bit of an eyebrow raiser. So Mickey arranged the photograph, and we sent Wayne Ludby up to Canberra that morning to take it before they changed their minds. And Ros Hawke happened to be in the room when this was being taken, and she said, "Oh, come on, Dad, put your arms around Paul." So he did, and that made the picture. And so he ran with the headline, I think it said, and they said it wouldn't last, ... But the comments in there that Keating made about the arrangement between them was very revealing, and it re-emerged yet again only a month or so ago at the Bob Hawke's funeral service when Keating was talking about the same sort of things. He had some funny lines. He said about the relationship that there's a saying in the antiques business that everything sells in its turn. And he said, and it's the same in politics. It was kind of a roller coaster ride. It was exciting and scary at the same time because, when I got the gig, I was told to prepare for it, I think early in '89, but just in case it happens. But I was sitting on a scholarship at Stanford. They said, don't come home, just think about it. So that was a strange way to plan a paper. But and then when it was formally announced in May, you only had 3 months' notice, and you knew you're up against those two papers with all their resources and experience. I was only 34, 35. I thought this is the opportunity of a lifetime, but it may be the last opportunity of a lifetime if this goes pear-shaped. And if we end up being squeezed out as people predicted and fold first, it'll be all my fault for putting out the wrong sort of paper. And if we succeeded, there'd be, there'd be plenty of people claiming ownership, so that was fine. We upset people, which you had to do. We upset Paul Keating when he became Prime Minister because we revealed his interest in a piggery, where he turned a fairly modest investment into a massive gain, literally overnight, and had a flash house in Paddington, which seemed to be quite a good collection for someone of his position. And he went ape about publishing a picture of his house and revealing his wealth. And I remember he rang up and said, I'm trying to pull all the big levers here in this country and you're running around worrying about what sort of house I've got in piggery. So that was an interesting phone call. Another time we upset the Packer crew because we revealed he was making extensive use of tax havens in the Caribbean, which ultimately led to some severe questioning in Canberra about his views on tax and whether governments deserve more tax money. It was the last big meteor, I guess, that just cascaded out onto the landscape. I mean, 3 newspapers anywhere in the world on the same day didn't happen before and hasn't happened since. And particularly in what was already a pretty saturated marketplace. So for that amount of corporate competition, let alone the journalistic competition, was remarkable. So it was a once in a lifetime thing, and anyone who went through it was awfully glad they were there and be part of it.